Um, I'm the Applied Research and Industry Partnerships Manager for the Maine Aquaculture Innovation Center, or MEIC. And we're a nonprofit organization with a mission to assist in developing socially, economically, and environmentally sustainable aquaculture opportunities in Maine. We serve as an educational resource about aquaculture. We conduct research projects, and we support new and established aquaculture businesses through grant programming and other business incubation support programs. So I thought I'd start off with just a little bit about aquaculture and what it is, in case you've never heard of it before. Aquaculture is the farming of aquatic organisms, including fish, shellfish, and plants in both freshwater and saltwater environments. In Maine, we aquaculture many different types of organisms, including shellfish like oysters and mussels, seaweed like kelp, and fish like salmon. And farms in Maine span the entire coast from Eastport all the way down to Kittery. I think aquaculture is a really exciting industry to be a part of because of two big reasons. The first is because of its growth and potential. Today, we have around 200 licensed marine farms in the state, which contribute around $85 to $100 million per year in sales to Maine's economy. Maine's aquaculture industry has been growing at around 2% for the past 20 years, which shows steady incremental growth over time, and there's tons of new opportunities to get involved. It feels like every year there's more and more stuff going on, which is really exciting. And the second big reason why I love aquaculture and being a part of this industry is because how interdisciplinary aquaculture is. Maine's aquaculture industry includes farmers, but it also includes scientists, engineers, chemists, business people, chefs, electricians, carpenters, and many more. The list goes on and on. So no matter what your interests are, you can find a way to get involved with aquaculture, which I think is a really special part of this industry. And so with that, I'll ask some of our panelists to introduce themselves, to share their names and positions. So Kelly, do you want to go first? You're first on my screen.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly Punch. I am the events and catering manager here at Mere Point Oyster Company. I started as just a farmhand, and then within the first 6 months, I started catering for the oyster farm. And so now I run all catering events, ecotourism, retail, all of that stuff.
Thanks. Trixie, you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Trixie Betts. I'm the Outreach and Development Specialist at the Maine Aquaculture Association. So I'm sort of our lead communications person, and the Maine Aquaculture Association is the nation's oldest aquaculture trade association, and we do a lot of work similar to what Sydney does, but we work to support the growers in the state and advocate for them at the state, national, and international levels. We support growers to develop environmentally responsible and sustainable business practices, promote the benefits of aquaculture, and highlight aquaculture as a tool for preserving our working waterfronts. So we do a lot of different things, and I do sort of storytelling and communications around that. And I also got started in aquaculture by working on a farm.
Awesome. Bree, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. My name is Bree Salter. I'm the production and research hatchery manager at Down East Institute. Down East Institute is a nonprofit marine lab with the mission of improving the quality of life for the people of Down East and coastal Maine through marine research, marine science education, and innovations in wild and cultured fisheries.
Awesome. And Jose?
Good afternoon. My name is Jose Fernandez Robledo. I'm a senior research scientist for Beagle Laboratory for Ocean Science. We're mostly a research institution, but more and more often we find ourselves supporting different activities, and aquaculture is one of them. Personally, my training is to pathology, essentially working with diseases of bivalves, oyster, clam, mussels.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So our first question is for everybody, and I think we could probably just go in the same order that we just introduced ourselves in. But for all panelists, what first sparked your interest in aquaculture, and how did you get started in the field?
So I first got started in aquaculture so I was in the hospitality industry. I worked in a really busy raw bar that had 20 different types of oyster every single day. And I quickly learned that the more I knew about the oysters, the more I would sell, the more money I would make. And so it became really important to me to do a lot of deep diving into how an oyster is grown, who's growing it, what the flavor profiles are. And a lot of times the oysters don't come with tasting notes. They don't come with anything really except the little tag that tells you where they're from. And it wasn't even totally specific. And so I wanted to know more about that. So doing my own research, reading a ton of books. It took me a long time to really learn all there was to learn about oysters just because nobody would have me on their farm. After working for the raw bar for a few years, I started calling every single oyster farm that we got to the raw bar. If they even had a website or a phone number, which was pretty much non-existent at that point in time, about 15, maybe a little longer, 15 years ago. The industry has changed drastically since then. Now traceability is a huge thing. You can find oyster farms and get their number and talk to people. But for me, it took 5 years to find somebody that would have me on their farm and show me what was going on. And we became quick friends. He got me into shucking oysters for clients really quickly, which turned into catering raw bars. From there, I knew I needed to get my hands on the product, work with it a little bit more. So I started working for Glidden Point. I worked a season there, went back to the raw bar, and the sales of the oysters just went up, up, up because I was a farmer. I knew what I was talking about. People trusted me. And so having that knowledge and the small amount of experience made a big difference. And then COVID happened. Everything closed down. I said, I know how to work on an oyster farm. I'll go do that. I'm sure in Maine on a boat by yourself, they're still working. Turns out they were. So I started on the farm in 2020. Early 2021, we started doing oyster catering, which quickly turned into full-blown catering, and ecotourism. So I knew starting here that would be a huge draw for a lot of people. If it took me 5 years just to get onto a farm to see what they're doing, I can't be the only one that wants to see what they're doing. People love knowing where their food grows. So that was a huge goal for me. It took off very quickly. As I suspected, people wanted to see what we're doing out here. And then the educational piece for me is huge. So the ecotourism, although it was still pretty busy year one, I realized not everyone wants to know about oysters. So to entice them out on the water, we started including lobster rolls and shrimp cocktail, which is a lot of different licensing and a lot of different other requirements that you need to do that. But for me, it was important to get everyone out on the farm, whether they liked oysters or not. You don't need to eat an oyster and enjoy it to understand how and why they're grown and respect the business. So if I have to bribe people with lobster rolls to get them out there, that's what I did. And now we have close to 1,000 people visiting the farm every summer.
All right, I'm next, right? So I graduated from the University of Maine, and I did not have any background in aquaculture at all. I grew up sailing, so I had some skills of working on the water. But I studied Spanish and criminal justice at school. And so when I graduated, I moved down to Brunswick and was working in a food service job and not enjoying my time there. And in Brunswick, and oh, sorry, my connection seems to be being a little weird.
You're back. You were
Okay,
gone
cool.
for a second, but you're
Okay.
back.
And my partner owns a farm in Brunswick. And so I was looking for something different to do. I had these skills of working sort of on the water in a bit of a different way. And I just asked if I could work on the farm for a few weeks while I found some other role, whether aligned with my degree or pursuing some kind of creative role, which is another one of my interests. And so I had no background, no exposure to aquaculture at all, did not come from an environmental science background or marine science background. And I thought I'd be working on the farm for 2 weeks, and that turned into 6 months. And so I worked from August to January, and got to kind of see the different ranges of the seasons on the farm and was just exposed to this incredible community of people. I think graduating, I was, everyone is wondering, what am I going to do with my life? What is my career going to be? And I think being exposed to aquaculture kind of opened my perspective on what my career could be in terms of what boxes do I want my career to check, rather than having a narrow, I must fill this role, I must do exactly this. Aquaculture kind of highlighted what are those base sort of standards that I'm looking for in a career. Is it that the people who I work with seem to enjoy what they do? Do I like doing what I do? Do I like waking up every day and going to work? Do I feel like I'm making some difference? I think, you know, there's this movement towards green jobs, and I definitely wanted to be involved in some way, shape, or form with the environment. And I just found that working on a farm kind of checked all of those boxes. And I was consistently fueled by the energy of the other people I was working with directly on the farm, and then also in the sector at large, going to events, meeting like really cool people like Kelly and Sydney, and just seeing that there's so many people who are excited about this work that make me excited about my work. And so I did that for a lot longer than I expected, was kind of inducted into this sector. And then after that, I moved on to work in sort of a traditional marketing role, maybe trying to flex my more creative muscles, and did not feel as fulfilled there. I wanted to find a way, how can I blend my creative skills with aquaculture, with storytelling, storytelling that has a mission and is trying to make an impact. And just the timing was right, and there was this role at the Maine Aquaculture Association that kind of was the perfect mix of both of those things. And it was also really validating for me, because I think I had this idea, which maybe I'll address later as a misconception, that in order to be in the aquaculture sector, you either need to be working on a farm exclusively, or you need to have a research background and know science and know biology and things like that. And I've learned so much through this role and interacting with other communications professionals that there are so many different roles for a variety of different skill sets, which, yeah, Sydney, you kind of mentioned that. There's a lot of room for people of varying skill sets in this sector. And so it was really good to know that someone who has more of a humanities background, specializes in storytelling and creative work, that there's sort of room in the sector for people like me. So I've been at the MAA for 2 years now, and just love what I do.
Awesome. Thanks, Trixie. Bree, would you like to answer next?
Yeah, I actually saw some parallels in Trixie's answer, where we both didn't know that it was it for us until we were in it. I feel that from you, Trixie. I graduated from UMaine with a degree in ecology and environmental sciences in 2019. When I graduated, I really didn't have a vision of what my ideal career would look like. All I knew at the time was that I didn't want to go back to school immediately. And I also had a strong desire to make a positive impact on the world in some way, which really led me to being open to anything. So I was casting a really, 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 really wide net. And finally, there was a hatchery technician position open at the Down East Institute. I applied. I didn't know anything about the area. I didn't know anything about aquaculture. So it was kind of a scary time for me, but I thought, why not, basically, and decided to jump in then, and I've been here ever since.
Awesome. And Jose, last but not least.
Well, my path is a little bit different. I grew up in Galicia, in northwest of Spain. You know, it's also I don't know, because the quality of the seafood. I grew up eating mussels almost every week. It was like potatoes in terms of price. So I graduated from the University of Santiago, and at the time there was a draft in Spain. You had to do your draft. So I already have the ticket. And a friend told me, oh, there is this person looking for somebody to do a PhD. So I applied, I didn't get it, but the person that got it decided to go somewhere else. So I was the next online. So over the next 4 years, I worked toward my PhD. It was in diseases that affect the mussels. The production over there is quite high. It's like 250,000 tons a year. And you know, in aquaculture, when you start growing in high densities, one of the problems that usually appears are diseases. During those 4 years, I learned about the diseases, not only the mussels, but also the oysters. I always tell the history of the oyster industry in France, where they were growing the European oyster. And then 2 different parasites, protozoan parasites, hit them in a row. to the point that they had to switch to the Asian oyster, the Crassostrea gigas. After I finished my PhD, I felt like I need to learn even more about the diseases. So I moved to the States to do my postdoc and then spent 16 years in Baltimore in the Center of Marine Biotechnology, where I developed different probes to detecting diseases. And then 13 years ago, I moved to Maine. I work in the interaction between the growers and the science, because sometimes you need to have both perspectives. Usually we look at the problem in a different way. And we always want to know more details about what's going on. So I mentioned before that I'm working now also with the clam contagious cancer. And one of the things that is very attractive for me as a scientist is that oyster clams, mussels, they can affect by any kind of disease, like human, by viruses, bacteria, pathogen, protozoans. However, they don't have, like we do, antibodies to fight them. And still they are able to overcome the disease. So how they do it is a very, very interesting question. I work with the parasite, but also now I'm trying to move a little bit more to the host side. And the reason is now it's kind of easy to sequence the genome of any organism, right? You invest, you have a genome with a lot of genes. In a lot of cases, you don't know what they do. So I'm trying to develop the tool to interrogate that genome. And the idea is that we can identify genes that maybe, in hatcheries, they can select either for resistance to disease, a hard shell, resistant to or tolerance to different temperatures. So I always try to bring the science to tackle problems in the industry.
Awesome, thank you. So our next question is a little bit more of a follow-up on our first one. So, what first sparked your interest in, oh, nope, sorry, wrong question. Here we go. Number 3. I'm back on track. What is a common misconception or misunderstanding about the aquaculture industry that you'd like to clear up? We can go in the same order, maybe, starting with Kelly.
So a common misconception, when I first started, I thought it was mostly an industry for just men on boats that are just out there doing whatever they want, like the Wild West. And at first, I think that it was a little bit more like that. And I think for me, I'm a little bit older than most of the people here, with exceptions for maybe Jose.
Yeah, I
Um,
think I beat you for a large.
When I started, I really didn't see many women in the industry. I got into oyster shucking competitions pretty early in my career, and I, for years, was the only woman, which made it pretty cool to be like, I'm the only woman. But now it's like half the women I shuck against in competition are really like deep in the industry, really love what they're doing, and it's great to see that things have changed so drastically in such a short period of time. I was the only woman on the farm when I started, and a couple of years went by, and now we are probably 40% women of a team of 20, which is unbelievable. Another misconception is that when you're in the aquaculture industry, you're growing an oyster. You could be in this industry and never touch an oyster. There are a lot of things to do, whether it's, food journalism, writing about oysters, telling the story like Trixie does, and Virginia from Lady Oyster, great storytellers, and the story behind what you're doing and why you're doing is really a huge grab for most people. If you just say, the overviews of an oyster farm, okay. It might not attract everyone, but when you get into the nuances and why you're so passionate about it, and it really just kind of opens that up for people. Another thing is just that, like, the social licensing has changed a lot as well, and that's a huge part to work on. So everybody in the industry takes a little piece of that and tries to educate not only just the neighbors, but people in town, people out of town. Um, and in the past, I feel like that conversation wasn't there. It was kind of if you're in the industry, you know about it and you talk to people in the industry. And now the oyster industry and aquaculture as a whole, people really want to share their experience. And that is kind of driving um, the employee pool to choose from because a lot more people are interested. It's not just growing the oyster, it's telling the story of the oyster, it's shucking the oyster, it's, helping with the research behind growing the oyster. There's just so many avenues, and the more we can talk about it, the more interest will generate from people who might not necessarily want to actually get on a boat, but want to be involved, which is just as important as growing the oyster.
Right. Mine is very similar, and I kind of just echo some of Kelly's points. Just this idea that there is a misconception is that there is one way to be in the industry, or that once you're on one path, that is the only path that you get to do. And I think I've talked with a lot of people because I'm in my role, having worked on a farm, that working on a farm is like one of your best ways to get into the sector. It has informed my work so that I'm better at doing what I do and communicating about the sector. Kind of telling a realistic and a true and authentic story. I draw directly from my time working on a farm, but also knowing that with a different range of skill sets, those can lead you in a variety of different directions. I think also, and I've definitely felt this way, maybe being part of like the Gen Z generation, is that I want to be making as big an impact as possible. I want to be saving the world. I want to be saving the climate. And there's a lot of pressure with that. And you can kind of set yourself up for failure if you're not considering ways you can make a local difference. And I definitely had to kind of grapple with that and learn and not sort of diminish the work that I was doing working on a single farm in Brunswick. I consider aquaculture as like climate justice, and growing food in a climate resilient way and low resource way is, I think, a really noble thing to do. And so if you're feeling any of the existential dread that I feel, and I'm sure many of us feel, making a local difference is making a difference. We can't all be in, DC making a difference, or working at these super higher levels, making these grander impacts. Not to say that you couldn't arrive there later in your career, but making a difference locally in your community, while not like completely exhausting yourself, also choosing things that fill you up, that then make you better able to do the work that you want to do, whether you transition from working on a farm into policy or into engineering gear that is more resilient, is stronger, doing biology things. There's a lot of different avenues into it, and starting working on a farm is one of the best ways to get connected to the people that you will need to know later, no matter what path you want to go down, whether you want to start your own farm. I think that's something that's really awesome about aquaculture, is it's so collaborative as well. So there are so many people who are willing to talk with you, no matter what stage of your career that you're at, or what level of interest or familiarity you have with the sector. So everyone is really open to talking with you, helping you advance your career. And starting on a farm, that can just be the start. There's definitely some people who want to work on a farm every day for the rest of their lives, and there's some people who realize it's not for them. I kind of realized it wasn't for me, and it wasn't something that I saw myself doing for a really long time, but I wanted to be involved in a different way. So I'd say starting on a farm just kind of opens these different limbs and branches to whatever direction that you want to go in. So it's definitely not a narrow sector.
So one common, sorry, I'm not sure if this is a common misconception, but something that I certainly was worried about and intimidated by starting this career was jumping right in without any formal training or experience. I had a vision that I needed to be using some of the coursework that I had taken in college in my career, and that's just not how it worked out, which is fine and great. And so I think I want to clear up for anyone that is interested in aquaculture, but maybe intimidated because you haven't taken intro to aquaculture. the only way to get your feet wet is to jump right in. And I think if you're curious about it, it's worth it to take the leap. And like Trixie touched on, there's so many supportive people that want to help you find your way. And so if you want to be involved, I absolutely think it's worth it and possible.
Yeah, thanks, Bree. Jose?
For me, it's very easy. We give a lot of tours of people at Bigelow. And when it's my turn and I talk about diseases, they always think, oh, are they going to affect me? You know, because the oyster of the clans are sick. So I always emphasize that if you are alive, there is always some other one is going to take advantage of you. But one of the things that happen with pathogens is that essentially they have evolved to be pathogen of that particular organism. So in general, the more complicated is the pathogen, the more difficult it is to jump. So, when I go out to the restaurant, I see the mussel, I can tell male from females, and I can even tell, oh, this was sick, but it doesn't stop me from eating them. So when you read in the newspaper that somebody got sick because it oyster, usually is because during the transport, they break the chain of cold, or maybe they were growing in one area where there is a lot of pathogen. And again, the diseases of the bivalves, oyster clams, mussel, they don't affect humans, so you are completely safe to eat them. The other thing that I emphasize is at the level of Bigelow. When you go to the road bar, and you have the oyster, there is a lot of things behind of them. For example, where that oyster harvest when it was possible because there were no toxins. So, in the lab, they developed the technology to make sure that what you're eating is safe. We also developed strains of microalgae that you need to use in the hatcheries, when you are spawning oysters. Any kind of value in terms of the composition. We also can do analysis. We are now jumping more into growing kelp, or more than growing, doing research. For example, sometimes we identify bottlenecks, and that's a reason for a scientist to start working in that particular bottleneck. So we always try to connect with the aquaculture industry to help with some kind of problem or bottleneck that they have. So, and again, Bigelow Laboratory for Ocean Science, but we are more than just ocean science. We are also, coast science and aquaculture.
Yeah, thanks. Those are some very important misconceptions to clear up, I think. So thank you for bringing those up. So now we have some more just kind of questions for each of our panelists. So I'll kind of skip around a little bit on our questions document just so the panelists know. But Bree, question for you. For those who don't understand what the production or hatchery side of aquaculture looks like, what is like a day in your life look like, a day on the job?
Yeah, so it's super seasonal and live animals are involved, so every day is a little bit different. But one thing that I start with during the production season every day, and really my favorite part of the day, is checking on all of the animals in the systems. Did everyone clear their food last night? Is anyone hungry? Is there any like basic needs that I need to take care of immediately? And then from there, I sort of make a plan of what our goals are for the day and how to get it all done while being as efficient as possible and ideally having a good time, because that helps a lot too, especially every day is different, but a lot of the tasks are very similar in the day. So I do my best to prioritize getting things done and also people having a good time. And then throughout the day, I'm checking in and coordinating with staff, checking on the systems and the animals, and making sure that we're also managing our long-term goals for the hatchery and any research projects that we're involved in.
Awesome, thank you. Continuing on the theme of like day-to-day jobs and aspects of a role in aquaculture. Kelly, when people picture running an oyster farm, they might just imagine kind of the working on the water side of it. But obviously, as we've been talking about for, 30 minutes now, there's a lot more to it. But what's one part of your day-to-day work that might surprise people or that they wouldn't expect is such a big part of running the business?
Yeah, to be honest, I'm barely on the farm at all anymore. I'm out there 2 days a week max, and when I am out there, it's purely to run oyster farm tours. So for me, a lot of my day entails all of our retail orders, which we get multiple every day, and people constantly calling and texting, like, I'm on my way there. Can I get them now? So for me, it's important to be on land, easily accessible by phone, email, text message, and always ready to just run and pack an order for retail. I think some people look over the retail sales as just a small thing, a drop in the bucket, but the retail is you get a better price for your oyster. And it also goes a long way with social licensing. The more retail orders that I fill, the more people that I get to talk to and interact with, give them a little view of what's going on around the farm, and any little bit that you can tell them while they're here and in front of you goes a long way. Um, that information, you'd be surprised, like if you can tell one person picking up oysters something new that they didn't know, they're going to tell their friends that are then eating the oysters with them, even if it's, hey, did you know that oysters eat algae and phytoplankton? Um, People don't all know that. And so one new fact that you can tell a customer can then impact a whole family, a group of friends. And so the retail side is really important for us because it also ties into the social licensing and the education piece for us. Um, so yeah, I do a lot of emailing and running around.
Yeah, it's a common thread, I think. Lots of
Yeah.
emails and running around.
Yeah, when we started, it was kind of like if you caught us on land, we would bag your oysters for you. And now it's when you see people have driven up from New Hampshire and they've spent all this time in the car to get the oysters, and then nobody's here. It's heartbreaking to me because now not only did you lose a sale, that's not the biggest downfall. The biggest downfall is now this person didn't have a good experience. They kind of think oyster farmers aren't always around. They're not accessible. You can't just stop by. And it's still the case for some, but that was the case when I started in this industry. And now you see a lot of people with little retail shops or just small operations to get oysters. And that goes a really long way for us. That community outreach piece is huge. Being able to be here on land to service customers, it really helped for us.
Yeah, and I think your answer, Kelly, like feeds right into one of the other questions we have written here. But you said you engage with the public through direct sales, a lot of retail,
Mhm.
direct to consumer types of sales. Why do you think that type of outreach is really important for the future of the industry?
So I think the more people we can educate about oysters and just ocean sciences, all sorts of aquaculture, whether it's oysters or mussels or just the phytoplankton that's in this particular bay or that particular bay, it gets people thinking. And the more people are thinking about what we're doing as a whole, the better for the industry because we'll not only get more people to support us by eating our oysters, but we'll get people to talk to their friends, talk to their family at dinner while they're eating them and tell them some interesting facts. And then they might get a little interest and start Googling. And next thing you know, they're working on a farm. So all it takes is like one little interesting fact to spark someone's interest where they now are going to go do your work for you and tell all their friends this one little thing that you told them that's interesting to them. So yeah, you need one person to reach like 50 other people if you can tell them a good story.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. So continuing the theme of kind of outreach and telling the stories of aquaculture. Trixie, you were recently involved in developing the film Tending the Tides, which is a really awesome film about the Maine apprenticeship program for aquaculture. So if you haven't seen it yet, I think there's going to be more screenings of that this summer. So can you tell us a little bit like about how that opportunity came up for you and what was the experience like to work on a longer form communication project?
Yeah, definitely. So that was a huge amount of work that I think I might have even underestimated when I started in it. I had never uh, sort of directed and produced a film of that length or a film like that at all before. I do mostly like short form video content for social, for our platforms. And so that was something that was kind of motivated by this massive interest that we've seen in aquaculture workforce development, specifically in this apprenticeship program that we, the Maine Aquaculture Association, created in collaboration with the Gulf of Maine Research Institute. And that is the first registered apprenticeship of its kind in the nation. That is a sort of technical and practical training opportunity that gets people out on a farm for 2,000 hours of on the farm work combined with 144 hours of technical coursework through the Southern Maine Community College. So you're getting a mix of like that time out on the farm and then also backed up with classroom time with experts in various fields. And so that was something that we launched in 2023. So we had a first cohort of 6 apprentices in 2023. There were 10 in 2024, and we've just started another cohort of 6 more this spring. And it is a program that has just gotten a massive amount of attention, a massive amount of interest. In the second year, there was over 60 applicants for 10 spots. It has attracted people from across the nation. So there's people who have relocated to Maine to work in this aquaculture apprenticeship from as far away as Alaska and California, because people are that dedicated to finding a role in aquaculture and directing their skills, whatever they may be, to aquaculture. And so there's a mix of people in this who have experience working on the water from in other places or within Maine. They may come from a fishing family. And then there's some people who have never worked on the water before in their lives. They come from terrestrial agriculture or carpentry. There's a whole swath of skill sets of the people who have taken part in this program. And so I, having seen this great interest, was wanting to communicate that to a broader audience, to both communicate that aquaculture workforce development is one of the key sort of bottlenecks to the growth of the sector. As we see farms beginning to scale up, there needs to be skilled, dedicated, qualified people to work on those farms in order for them to grow. Like Kelly kind of said, in order to do a lot of that management and address some of that demand, everyone can't be on the farm at all times. So having people who are wanting to work on farms or wanting to work in other areas of the farms, whether it's distribution or client relations, there needs to be people who are willing to fill those roles. And so we were kind of using this as a tool to communicate, here are the opportunities that there are for people who are not necessarily going to see themselves in apprenticeship roles. Here is the young people that are relocating to Maine, moving thousands of miles to work in this sector. And that's something we should be really proud of as a state, knowing that we're the oldest state in the country. And there's a lot of young people who grew up here, not considering pursuing careers here. So there's green job opportunities in this sector. And it's a crucial piece of our working waterfronts is that there's new businesses that are growing. There's opportunities for people to work on the water who are interested in doing that, making sure that there's avenues for them to continue to do that, whether it's doing commercial fishing and diversifying with aquaculture or going, completely into aquaculture and focusing 100% of your time on that. So it was kind of a tool of, here is this opportunity if you're not aware of it. And then also for the general public, here's kind of what's at stake when we're talking about this sector and growing the sector. And here are young people who are so happy and so excited to be working in it. Let's make sure that they continue to have that opportunity, that we support the growth of the sector, that we're supporting research into innovative methods within the sector to make sure that these jobs are quality jobs to have, that people want to have. And then the scaling of the sector also increases the quality of those jobs, wherein folks are able to work on farms and have competitive pay and benefits and PTO and all those things that keep people working, in sort of the same roles for more than a short period of time, especially knowing that we have a lot of seasonal jobs in Maine. But throughout the seasons, everyone's career kind of changes a little bit. So that's something that we launched in May. We had a premiere, and then it'll also be being shown at the Maine Outdoor Film Festival on July 24th during the day. We're hosting some other screenings, which I can like include a link if we want to send it out later, of some other screenings that are coming up. It'll be screening on Maine Public. We're hosting some other screenings at other venues, but I can follow up with that information rather than just like go down the list. But I would love for people to see it. And there's a lot of people who saw it, and I think it sort of reminded them why they do what they do, whether they're farm owners, farm managers, people who just like consuming oysters. A lot of people were kind of reminded that this is the reason that they're doing what they're doing, and yeah, kind of like why we all love to do what we do. So hoping to share that with as many people as possible.
Definitely. Thanks, Trixie. So I think we have maybe time for a couple more questions before we're going to open up this up to for a audience Q&A. So a reminder to continue sharing your questions down in the Q&A function at the bottom there. So Jose, your work spans everything from oyster diseases to genetically engineered microalgae. Can you describe how biotechnology intersects with aquaculture? And do you see an intersection at all between tech and aquaculture?
Definitely. I work with this particular parasite that is called dermo. And, you know, the parasites, they are not guilty of being parasites. So I want to give them a good name. So essentially, I'm trying to teach tricks to the parasite to our benefit. And some of the benefit, it could be to use the parasite to better understand how the oyster fight pathogens in general. As I mentioned before, oysters, clams, they don't have antibodies. You know, we get the vaccine, so we generate antibodies. So if we see the pathogen again, the antibodies are ready to attack. Oysters don't have antibodies. However, they are able to fight the same sort of pathogens. How they do it, maybe also, if we discover it, can be the way to identify new ways to treat human diseases. The other that I mentioned before is great to have a genome of one organism. It's even better to put that genome to work. And you know, if you find that the oyster in one area is resistant to a particular pathogen, you know, there is a gene or a set of genes behind that. Identify those genes can help the hatcheries to, through selective breeding, breed for a particular characteristic that is good for the aquaculture. Also, we have to be ready because when one industry where you're growing animals expands, sooner or later you're going to have some infectious diseases that can, you know, put you out of business. So the more we understand how the immune system of this organism work, we can take action faster. What was the first part of the question? Sorry.
I was muted. All right. Can you describe how how biotechnology intersects with aquaculture?
Yeah, I guess then I did cover it. The other, for example, you know, just going back to different labs, we are constantly looking for new microalgae that, you know, because the content, the nutritive content can maybe improve the, you know, in a hatchery, in first stage in the hatchery. We also, there is a group that is looking for a way to preserve kelp seed, because it looks like that's a bottleneck. They can get in a particular time of the year, but the rest of the year they don't have seed. So they're working in ways to cryopreserve that, so that we're able to have a seed any time of the year. And you name it. And again, you know, once you go to science, sometimes the science that you are trying to study take you somewhere else. And in my case, that somewhere else is related to human diseases, because I think with my system, I can answer questions that maybe is very difficult using other systems.
Awesome, thank you. I have a question for Jose and Bree. And Bree, this kind of goes back to your earlier point about how your background, maybe what your coursework in college was very different than what you do now in your kind of everyday job. Um, and I definitely feel this too as someone with a science background who moved into something maybe not as hard science. Um, do you have advice for students trying to bridge that gap between your college coursework and the skills you learn in school versus a career in STEM and what that job might look like?
Yeah, I didn't prepare for this question, so bear with me. But I think just because I didn't necessarily take an aquaculture specific course in college didn't mean that it doesn't mean that I didn't learn things in college to apply to this job that I have now. Um, all of the lab work that I did in the various different labs that I had to take prepped me for, learning about all of these systems and gradually transitioning to being able to handle them myself. So I think it's worth trying to draw parallels, even if the parallels aren't like super obvious. Um, if you're interested in getting into aquaculture, because there probably is something there. There's probably some strength or experience that you have that you can draw on to help you learn more about the industry.
Definitely. Thanks. Jose, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, we have this summer program. It's called RU Research Experience for Undergrad, and it's 10 weeks. It's very intensive, but it's only 10 weeks. So what we try to do is to train the student to think. So they may end working in what I'm doing, but most likely they will end working in something else. But essentially, we teach them the essentials, how science works and what is to be the day-to-day in a lab. Do I like this or not? So I have examples of students that after the RU, they were not ready for a PhD. So they said, no, I want to work as a technician in a lab. And then, we get the basic skill for apply for that job. And then later on, I have example where they keep being a technician and somebody decide to pursue a PhD. So I would say try to explore different possibilities and be open to maybe your science taking you somewhere else. I've been talking here about aquaculture, but I can talk about other projects that are completely different, but I had the basis for exploring those other avenues. So try to do internships in things that that are attracted to you, or and take it from there. You like it or not, and we all have been in places that we don't want to come back, but sometimes you hit the nail.
Definitely. That's important, I think, is to keep trying new things and something doesn't fit, it's not your fault. You can just try something else. So we do have some questions from the Q&A coming in here, so it looks like I have a little bit of time to get to some of them. This question, so anyone can feel free to jump in and answer. What is the hardest part about getting into the aquaculture industry? There's any barriers?
I would say it would depend on where you're kind of trying to start. So I know that there are more farmhand jobs than there are maybe other jobs like research positions, communications roles. I think there are probably fewer year-round opportunities as well compared to seasonal opportunities. So in the summer, you're going to see an increase in farmhand openings, but they're only for a shorter period of time. So I think the sector is growing, and the idea is to provide more opportunities in a broad range of pieces of the field. But I would say, with the sector being relatively small right now, it may be that for some of these roles, as interest continues to increase, they can become more competitive. Kelly might know more about that, having spent more time on a farm and more time on farms recently, but I would think that the seasonality in terms of finding a job that you could stay in and you want to stay in, and they can accommodate employing you through the year. If working on a farm is what you're interested in doing, that is sort of a bit of an obstacle. And then for Maine is also kind of a smaller state. So like there's only so many organizations that do either specifically research or policy like what my organization does. And so some of those roles can be kind of competitive, but I think if you're persistent and you network and you put yourself out there also as someone who is really willing to learn and enthusiastic about the sector, that goes way farther than I think having the exact right experience that someone is looking for. Like showing that you are dedicated to it, because I sometimes consider aquaculture as like more so a movement than even an industry. Like we need people who are willing to dedicate their time and are interested in being committed through, you know, the variety of obstacles that the sector faces as kind of a new sector. So that's maybe not a super concrete answer, but it's like some kind of answer.
Yeah. And Trixie, I will add diversification. If you focus in one species, maybe seasonal, but if you look at all the aquaculture, probably there is work through the year that you can fulfill.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, thanks, Trixie. So I think we'll do one more question before we have like a wrap-up question from all the panelists. So this person is interested in health trends and disease outbreaks. So his question's specifically for Jose, but anyone else can feel free to jump in and answer too. Given your research, how do you use this type of data to inform your decisions in this field?
Well, ideally, you want to have a baseline. And I understand, you know, in most cases, my experience in Spain, my experience in Baltimore, my experience here is that unless there is a outbreak or mass mortality, the farmers are already happy working with a particular level of disease that maybe is not noticed. They assume we're gonna lose this amount of the production. So for me, the ideal situation is to, at the level of the hatcheries, to have different families, different strain, that if something happens, you essentially start using a different one. So that's one information that we don't yet have, but I think I can see that in the future. Essentially, depending of what pathogen is around, you use a particular family of oyster or another. The other thing that we are learning, for example, in Maine, there is restriction of what you can move, and you cannot move things out of the state. So I know there is some group now trying to change that, because you don't want to move because you're moving a pathogen. But if the pathogen is in both sides, you are moving equal to equal. So that will also open the opportunity to maybe bring in different strains of the oyster from one state to another, because essentially you are not bringing other pathogens. And yeah, the other thing, again, you know, the different departments of marine resources, they have limited media resources, so they have to limit it where they put the money. And sometimes, you know, for when an outbreak happens, you are lacking on information year before. So sometimes that makes it more difficult to analyze what happened here, because you want to know how things were right before. But
Great, thank you.
The other thing is we read a lot of literature, and maybe somewhere else in another country have something, you know, on the lines, and we can help use that to figure out what happened here.
Definitely. All right, so we have about 3 minutes left. So we have a closing question for our panelists that maybe we can just do like a quick sentence on, so we can make sure everyone gets time to answer. But each of you comes to aquaculture from a different angle. You've had different educations, different backgrounds. But what made aquaculture the right fit for your path? And yeah, we'll just leave it there. What made aquaculture the right fit for your path?
I think aquaculture was the right fit for me because like Trixie said, I really like making a difference. I really enjoy the storytelling that connects people to something, whether it's their food or whether it's the ocean or their environment, the connection between that thing and the person is what makes them really feel passionate about something. So for me, I really love getting other people involved and showing them all of the fun things, all of the interesting things. Um, so for me, I think that being the, retail manager and eco tourism manager, really, that's like perfect for me. I get to talk to everyone. I get to answer a million questions, and just show people the things that I had been wanting to see for so long, and to have them accessible to pretty much everyone that wants to see them now. It's awesome. I love it.
Thanks, Kelly.
Yeah, I agree with Kelly. I think aquaculture has been the right fit for me as a creative person, I think, because it the future is kind of not yet written. Like we are all kind of writing it right now. It's this sector that's only been around for, X number of decades in Maine. And it has so much potential, and we are still kind of blazing that trail. We are learning a ton from other countries that are eons ahead of us in terms of aquaculture production and aquaculture technology. But in the United States, we are kind of leading a lot of that, like within Maine, which is cool because we're way up on the corner of the country. And yeah, we're kind of blazing that trail ourselves. And I also think it allows people to be really creative and be really innovative. And Maine, I think, is kind of this, especially like globally related to other aquaculture sectors across the globe, we're a bit of an underdog. So it's like I like kind of rooting for the underdog and working really hard to make sure that the future of aquaculture is bright in the US and in Maine, knowing that we need to have better domestic seafood production. And if we can grow that in Maine, I think that would be awesome. And so, like, if there's people who want to be in something that is sort of getting in at the ground level as it continues to grow, I think aquaculture needs people like that. And there's a lot of space for people like that.
Thanks, Trixie.
I know the connection and impact piece that you guys both touched on. And also for me personally, I love looking at bivalves under the microscope, and I love growing microalgae. So glad to be here.
It is very cool what you do, Bree. So thanks.
I love seafood and I want more people to try it. And at the same time, I think it's a very good organism to do basic science. So I can get both. How many times you can work with something that you can eat?
I feel that.
Before I forget, you wanna know more about Bigelow, we're gonna have an open house on July 11th, and we just expanded. We have a new wing in the center. So you wanna know a little bit more about Bigelow, July 11th?
Awesome. Well, and Jose, feel free to share that information with me and I can share it out to this group of people who are listening so they can learn more about that day.
Definitely,
But
I'll do.
yeah, I know we're a little bit right at the end of time, but want to give, I know no one's here to clap. We know they're watching, but we can't see them, but a virtual round of applause for Sydney, Trixie, Bree, Jose, Kelly. That was really insightful, really, and just what a wonderful note to end on. I think all of your final answers really well illustrate the wide range of reasons that you're all in this and reasons that people can connect to who are listening. So thank you so much for joining us today and Sydney for leading that conversation. And for folks watching, if you have further questions and you want to reach out, feel free to email me and I can pass along questions or connections or things like that. We're getting applause in the chat.
Yeah. Thank you very much for having us.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good
Thanks,
one.
Sydney.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.